Hello everyone, I'm Nee here, and welcome back to WUCHANG Fallen Feathers. It is approximately 6:30 or so in the morning, so wife is still asleep, so I'm going to be talking in a more hushed tone. But we are going to finally do the one-handed sword skill tree. On top of that, we're going to talk about some other things that are acquainted with that skill tree, things such as the difference between magic and feathering. We'll go over the different types of spells that there are, what the weapons for one-handed sword offer, and on top of just regular physical damage. And then we'll also get into scaling a little bit because scaling kind of matters the most, I would say, for one-handed swords and for spells, simply because both the weapon and the spells have scaling, but that scaling is interpreted a little bit differently between the two. So let's get started. So if you go over to the very right, the direct right of this tree from the middle, you enter into the one-handed swords skill tree. Now, to give a summary of what one-handed swords do, it is from a damage perspective, a physical damage perspective. It is good for DPS. It's not great at outputting large amounts of damage, but combined with something like the dual blades skill tree, it really could put out a decent amount of damage. It is an agility based class, so if you want to do the most physical damage with this class, you would need to spec into agility more than anything. Having a good amount of endurance would help as well, just to keep up your attacks. But the primary use of one-handed swords is the abundance of magic and feathering upgrade nodes. So when we start out, we start with our default discipline, Flickering Blade. Brandish your sword with lightning speed to weaken the enemy's attack. Grants partial immunity to damage, but does not block all incoming attacks. Use with Skyborne Might for greater potency. You will mitigate some damage from attacks, but if there are multiple attacks in a row, you will not be able to block all of them. So just take that all into account if you are to use this move. Then you have Biding Time. Gain one stack of Skyborne Might every so often while wielding a one-handed sword. So first prerequisite, you have to have a one-handed sword equipped in order for Biding Time to take effect. If you have spec'd into another weapon type, such as dual blades, and you switch to that, or you do like a swift draw or something like that, Biding Time will no longer be in effect. It will only ever be in effect when you have a one-handed sword equipped. Some one-handed sword light attacks and dash attacks, as well as spells, weapon skills, and discipline skills, used with Skyborne Might, grant Biding Time stacks, enabling you to earn Skyborne Might faster. So as you can see in the little video over here, she's casting Vorpal Blade, which is the default spell that they give you at the beginning of the game. This spell in particular, among others, behaves in such a way that when you use it, it grants you more stacks for Biding Time, which by proxy gains you more stacks to earn Skyborne Might faster. So it's like you use the spell, now you've gained a stack of Biding Time, and that gauge, that meter, is ever building, right? It's always gradually building until it fills up, and once it fills up, you get a stack of Skyborne Might. So when you use certain spells, or you use certain disciplines, or you use certain types of attacks, um, you're constantly adding more to that gauge for it to build on top of its natural regeneration that it already has. Um, and it will, like I said, it just builds, and when it fills up, you get more Skyborne Might, which you'll need A lot. You'll need a lot of it because you're going to primarily be using magic with this. Anyone who's ever wanted to do like a spell blade type of build, this is what that weapon type would be for. I'm also going to kind of go over to the left into the utility tree a little bit to explain some things. Well, not explain some things, but just to show you some things that can help, um, I guess, amplify fighting time as well. But we go forward here, then you have Wind Force. You can consume 1 stack of Skyborne Might to quickly strike with charged heavy one-handed sword strikes. And again, once you have Skyborne Might, you just press the button, immediately fully charged, ready to go, and she does the full animation for you. You do not have to hold the button down. Then we enter our first split. So if we decide that we want to go up, we have 1 level of +1 magic. We have 1 level of +5 magic. Going up, we have our first Swift Blade node, which will deal with our weapons upgrade path, its ascension, getting a more powerful one-handed sword. Going over to the left, or to the right rather, you have 3 levels of +1 vitality. Going up, you have 1 level of +1 agility, 3 levels of +1 endurance. To the left, 1 level of +5 agility. Going right, 1 level of +1 agility. And then we hit um, our first discipline for this weapon. Spinning kick. Leap forward and kick the enemy with great force. Use with Skyborne Might for greater potency. Going to the right here for the first variant. Adds a second attack to spinning kick. So just another attack. Give you more damage. Variant 2. While at above 90% madness, spinning kick gains increased potency and makes it quicker to open up enemies for obliterate attacks when used with Skyborne Might. So as we talked about before, it's going to increase the amount that circular vulnerability gauge increases. So when using this, it's going to make that jump up quite a bit, making it easier for you to attain a vulnerability state where you can use an obliterate attack, right? So pretty good. Going to the right, after coming out of that tree, you have 1 level of +1 vitality. Then you have another weapon trait, Ascending Wrath. While at above 90% madness, the final attack of a one-handed sword light attack combo grants 1 stack of Skyborne Might if it hits an enemy. So the final hit gives you an additional stack. And then we have this split. So if we decide that we're going to go up, we will get more magic. So we have, and this whole line, right? Like this whole thing, it's just magic, right? So you have 3 levels of +1, 1 level of +1, 3 levels of +1, 1 level of +1, going up 1 level of +1. Then you have your second discipline, Slicing Zephyr. Soar on the air current, charge forward while spinning, and strike all around you. Then harness your momentum to deliver a powerful sweeping slash. Use with Skyborne Might for greater potency. And then the only variant for this particular discipline. When used with Skyborne Might, the second attack of Slicing Zephyr sends forth a powerful vortex that sends enemies flying. Regular enemies, regular small to medium-sized enemies will be knocked back and knocked down from this. So that just allows you to run up, dash up, get as many attacks in as you can get, or buff yourself with magic, or use magic on them to proc some kind of status ailment, be it burn or corruption or frostbite or whatever. Really good for just being allowed to recuperate if you need to recuperate, or to press the attack if you'd like to press the attack. Going over, we have 5 levels +1 magic, 1 level of +1 magic. Going down, 1 level of +5 magic. Going over, 1 level of +1 magic. 3 levels of +1 magic. Going up, 1 level of +5 magic. Going down, 1 level of, or I'm sorry, 3 levels of +1 magic. And then going down further, 1 level of +5 agility. Going to the right, we have another node for weapon ascension. And then from here, we can go down, and this is all feathering. Feathering, well, we'll get into that here in a second. So you have one level of +1 feathering, one level of +1 feathering, one level of +5 feathering, going down further. Going to the left, you have one level of +1 feathering, one level of +1 feathering, one level of +5 feathering, 3 levels of +1 feathering, one level of +1 feathering, another level of +1 feathering. And then we have our third discipline, Vanguard Breaker. Summon all your strength for a powerful forward thrust. Used with Skyborne Might for greater potency, also inflicting poise break buildup on the enemy. So it not only does stab damage, but it also can inflict poise break buildup on enemies that are susceptible to it. Variant 1, when used with Skyborne Might, Vanguard Breaker grants your weapon a more potent poise break effect. So now that potency of poise break is greater, so you inflict more, allowing it to proc easier and faster. Going to variant 2, enables you to chain a one-handed sword light attack after Vanguard Breaker. So as you can see from the video, she uses it and goes straight into the final hit of a light attack combo, through which you can just continue to do your combo afterwards, or back off, use magic, heal, whatever it is you need to do. Ball's really in your court after that, right? Going up and to the left, you have 3 levels of +1 feathering, 1 level of +1 feathering, 3 levels of +1 feathering, and then we have this another node that is Swift Blade for weapon ascension. Going down from Ascending Wrath, you have 1 level of +1 vitality, 3 levels of +1 vitality. Going down from there, you have 1 level of +1 agility, 3 levels of +1 endurance. Going to the left, 1 level of +5 agility. Going to the right, 1 level of +1 agility. And then going down, our fourth and final discipline, Swift Lunge. Focus your being and launch a stabbing attack. Use with Skyborne Might for greater potency. The first variant, while at above 90% madness, Swift Lunge inflicts frostbite buildup when used with Skyborne Might, which is good for reducing the damage that enemies do, and it might even have something to do with their stamina meter. I know that if you get inflicted with frostbite, your stamina you lose like half of your max stamina. It's kind of like barred behind ice, and you can't deal with it until the ailment has dispersed, right? But I think for enemies, I think it's just reduced damage dealt for them. They don't deal out as much damage. And then variant 2 adds a second attack to Swift Lunge with the Clash effect. This is the only discipline that this weapon type has that inflicts Clash. So you will not be clashing very much with this weapon type. Like I said, for the most part, you will be using magic, right? You will be trying to gain Skyborne Might through use of biding time, through use of maybe trying to get a full light attack combo on an enemy to gain some Skyborne Might. Through item use, if you need to use like plume feathers or something, you can use that. But this is not a class that is focused on doing physical damage with the weapon that you have, primarily. And then going over from the third level of, or coming out of this tree, you have 1 level of +5 feathering, and then our final Swift Blade node. And then going back, you have 1 level of +1 feathering. So that is the tree. And so now that we've gone through the tree, we need to talk about the difference between magic and feathering. Now, let's start with magic. Magic boosts the damage of magic type spells and weapons. Some weapons will have magic damage that are intrinsic to the weapon. It will be built into the weapon from the moment that you get it. And with use of a magic bone needle, you can increase that damage through temperance. This, activating these nodes allows you to increase the damage that is done on the weapon, as well as the damage of magic type spells. And we'll get into spells here in a second. So, in order for you to do the most damage with your spells, you have to spec into one of these stats. Now, to dive into spells a little bit, spells are basically divided into three categories: magic type, feathering type, other, and other type. That's it. And other is usually utility type stuff, like your next attack does increase damage or something like that. But any kind of spell that does offensive damage, it will primarily be either a magic-based spell, which means it scales with magic, or a feathering-based spell, which means it scales with feathering. Feathering, on the other hand, does basically the same thing, but it's a little different. Not really different. So feathering boosts the weapon damage affected by feathering properties, right? One-handed swords are good for feathering damage. You can also go into long swords and gain some feathering. Um, there's not too many weapon types in the game. Maybe 2 of 5 that deal with feathering damage innately. I just got like a long sword that does feathering damage, so it would be good for me to spec into this tree if I was to use that sword, and to get all these different upgrades and stuff, because feathering would that would just make the sword stronger. But there are also spells that are feathering type spells that will not get stronger unless you upgrade feathering nodes. So if you want to use magic based spells, you want to spec into feathering. If your weapon does magic damage, you want to spec into magic. If you want to use feathering based spells, you would spec into feathering and to increase their damage. And if you have a weapon that uses feathering properties, you want to spec into feathering, because that's what's going to make it stronger. It's not enough to just raise the agility or the strength of the weapon. That will help, but your primary means of damage is coming from the feathering stat, not the agility stat, right? So once you understand that, then we can kind of get into the spells. So spells, like I've said, are divided into 3 categories. You have regular magic, you have feathering, you have other. Other does not scale. Other spells, well, the spell type other, does not scale with anything. It is meant to just give you a boost, give you a bonus of some type, and then once you have either done and completed an action that gives you the increased damage of your next attack, or you've waited a certain amount of time and then it goes away, that's just what it does, right? Whereas something like Vorpal Blade scales with magic, something like Corruptive Flames scales with feathering. So, as you can see here, both of these they have level 1 by them. Scaling in this game goes from 1 to 6, 1 being the lowest, 6 being the highest. So if we were to translate this into letter grades, it would be from 1 to 6, E, D, C, B, A, S. So a level 1 is an E. It has terrible scaling. It's not to mean that it's necessarily a bad spell, it's just got terrible scaling. Same idea for feathering. It's level 1 scaling for feathering. Now, this number here indicates how much magic that you have. You'll also notice this little diagram down here of these kind of leaves, right? As you can see, my endurance is at 43, my vitality is at 38, and those leaves have grown out, whereas my magic and feathering are at 7, so those leaves are very, very small. So the more that you increase these specific attributes, the more those leaves go out. Those leaves can give you somewhat of an indication of how powerful your spells will be, how much damage they'll do at the very least, right? But the best way to know what the damage is to just try it out, right? Just equip the spell that you want to use, um, and try it out. And if it's not doing enough damage, then that's how you know you need to either upgrade magic or you need to upgrade feathering. And there are a pretty good abundance of spells. I obviously don't have everything. But each one of these spells are pretty good. Now I will say that I have yet to find a reason to use 5 stacks of Skyborne Might for a spell. I definitely think that there are some spells here that you just should not use simply because of the cost. And not just the cost, the animation. If the animation's too long, and like for instance, Echo of the Bow Sorcerer. This is a spell that is based in magic, and it requires 5 stacks of Skyborne Might, so your full meter basically. Um, and so not only are you using your entire meter, but the animation for this is long enough to matter. And it doesn't allow you to use alacrity, which allows you to kind of evade attacks when you're in the midst of an animation, right? Whereas something like this spell, which is based in feathering and only requires 3, you can leap and throw a spear, dealing feathering damage, and it can trigger alacrity if you're attacked while casting. So if you cast this and they hit you, well, you've just kind of done like this misty evade. You kind of warp back into the void, and you don't take any damage, right? So choosing a spell should come down to a few considerations. It come down to the cost at first. In my opinion, you should never be spending anything over 3 Skyborne Might to use a spell. It depends on the animation, and what I mean by that is the speed of the animation. How quick does this thing come out once you hit the button? How quick are you able to recover and dodge and back off once you've finished using the spell? What kind of traits does the spell provide you, right? Like something like Divine Might is like pretty decent, because if you're really into charge attacks, then you can use this to buff yourself, and then you can charge an attack. And now that attack, on top of any other buffs that you might have stacked on top of that, be it from pendants or from benedictions or whatever, this now adds to that damage, right? It only costs 1 Skyborne Might. It's a very quick spell. The animation is super quick. It costs you nothing. And it provides you an increased damage boost, right? So this is like good. But then if you were to use something like this, which is based in magic, it costs 5 Skyborne Might. It summons a magic circle that deals magic damage. It's got a 1 in scaling, so it scales poorly, and the animation is long. The cost is high, and you get hit after you used it, well, they're gonna knock you out of the spell, and now you've just lost 5 Skyborne Might for no reason, right? So this is like a poor choice in spell. So your spells should always do something for you. You also have spells that will inflict status elements on enemies, like Internal Flames. This does 70 burn when I cast it. It's got a pretty decent animation. It doesn't cost very much, and it tracks enemies. Now, if I cast at them and they immediately jump towards me, it's not a missile, right? It's not gonna just immediately turn around and hit the enemy. But if they stay at a distance and I use it, it's got a decent speed, The animation is quick for summoning it, and after the face goes forward, I don't really have to worry about it anymore. I can still move around, and I have agency over my character. Stuff like that. You also have something like this. Heavenly Thunder, Magic Base, requires 3 Skyborne Might, call down lightning that strikes an enemy and then spreads outward. This has 100 paralysis buildup. And it not only strikes the enemy that I've targeted, if there are enemies around next to it, they'll catch a bit of the damage as well, right? So it's really just about what the spell has to offer you, what its effect is, how much it costs, the animation, and ultimately how well does it insert itself into your game plan, right? So that's kind of something to think about when choosing spells. So now that we've talked about spells, let's talk about weapons a little bit. Weapons for one-handed swords are a little different than other weapons in that these are equally as much, I guess, catalysts for your spells as they are weapons to do physical damage. So you'll look at like the slash, stab, and blunt here. They don't really do a whole lot of damage, right? I mean, granted it's in the red, but like these just don't do a lot of damage. Now they do have certain traits to them, like this Watcher's Gaze will increase your weapon's magic attack power for consecutive attacks. So if you just keep going, you'll get more magic. Um, you'll get more magic attack power, and that will allow the sword to do more magic damage. But outside of that, there's not really much reason to use these as primary weapons, I would say, like as primary damage dealing weapons, right? I've always kind of considered this class to be a secondary class. This is a class that you spec into so that you have the means to increase either your feathering damage or your magic damage. But this is not a class that I would main and try to run through the entire game with. Just because, not to say that it's not possible, but just to say that it's weak in terms of physical damage. But one other thing that these swords have is that you'll notice spell power at the bottom there. Each one of these weapons increases your spell power by a set amount. So this one's 5, this one's 10, this one's 7, right? And they each also have magic that is intrinsic to the weapon. So no matter what you do to this weapon, it'll always have some kind of magic damage to it. So on top of that, there's also the scaling that you have to worry about as well. As you can see, Watcher's Gauge scales, it's a level 1 in agility, so that's an E rating, and then it's a level 5 in magic, which is an A rating. So this scales really well with magic. But you'll notice that it looks a little different this time. So the number that is next to the level is the amount of magic that I have. We can prove that by going over here and then looking at my magic. It says 7. I have 7 magic, right? Oops. I have 7 magic, but you'll notice this other number in parentheses. The number in parentheses lets you know how much of a specific attribute you need in order to use the weapon effectively. So it's like a weapon stat requirement, right? So in this case, they're all 0. But Astral Blade is 7. So if I don't have at least 7 magic, I can't use this weapon effectively. And I won't gain any of the potential buffs or traits that are inherent in this weapon, right? So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all that there is to say about that. All I can really say past that is, I guess, kind of going into scaling a little bit. Whenever you use a specific weapon, be it a one-handed sword or an axe or spear or whatever, You always want to take a look at this the scaling, because some weapons are considered strength control weapons, others agility control weapons, or like this one, this is a magic control weapon, which means it's not gonna, like, if you increase the agility, it'll scale a little bit, but you're not gonna get a lot out of this weapon from increasing the agility. You're gonna get the most out of this weapon by increasing the magic. So that's your control stat, right? That's the stat that's your primary stat that you're using for this weapon. Um, and that's with any weapon, not just one-handed swords. So you always want to make sure that you look at how much, well, first of all, how much of a specific stat that you have, and then secondly, how much you have, how much you need, and what weapon that you're trying to use, right? Because you never want to use a weapon like one-handed swords and then spec into something like strength. Strength is not going to do nothing for this class. Absolutely nothing. Um, so don't spec into strength, right? You want to spec into magic. And like I said, there's not really too much more I can really say about it. It's just like the higher, so like for this one, you don't, well, let's go to Astral Blade. For Astral Blade, you need 7, right? You need 7 to even use it effectively. But what happens if I increase it more, right? So like, for instance, I'm in Axis right now, and I have 43 strength, and this scales on a level 4. It's a level 4, so it's a B scaling. But I only needed 7. So I am getting like 122 extra damage from the scaling. And I imagine that the higher that my strength gets, now there definitely are, like, I guess you could say, soft caps to it. So you'll reach a certain level of strength or of agility, and you'll get a certain amount, and then you might increase a little bit more, and you might not get as much. There are definitely diminishing returns when it comes to scaling. Um, and then there's an eventual hard cap, which is the end of that leaf. If that leaf is built up all the way, then that's your hard cap, which means you can't go any further than that. You're not going to get any more damage out of it unless you do something like temperance or like benedictions or something, or like pendants or something of that nature, to try to push a little bit more out of it. But eventually everything's going to have a hard cap when it comes to damage, via innately or from scaling, right? So yeah, one last thing I wanted to show you before we end the video here is that if we go over here to the left and go down, we have this node called Unbroken Focus, which, while at above 90% madness, the buff provided by biding time will not decay below 3 stacks. So if you gain enough Skyborne Might and you don't use it within a set period of time, you will have stacks diminish away one by one until you don't have any more, right? What this does is it makes it to where when you have a one-handed sword equipped and you have biding time obtained, no matter what happens, you'll never go under 3 stacks, which is good because now you don't have to do any of the things that you would have to do in order to gain those 3 stacks back, right? You don't have to worry about dodging as much. You don't have to worry about using items like plume branches as much. You don't have to worry about using the final hits of a light attack combo hitting in order to get a stack, right? You don't have to worry about any of that stuff as much because it can never go under 3. So as long as you get it to 3, you're just kind of sat there. And then, like I said, with biding time equipped, you are constantly gradually building Skyborne Might. If you're attacking with it, then you're gaining more stacks towards that regeneration gauge. Using certain spells, you're gaining regeneration towards that gauge. Weapon skills, disciplines, all that different kind of stuff. You're building regeneration stacks towards the regeneration of that gauge, right? And then one other thing that I can show you is that you have all these different things down here that you'll definitely need to come in and get, depending on, you won't need all of them, but depending on the type of spells that you're using something like this, um, or obtaining something like this can definitely help. Um, like I like to use burn a lot, so I probably should get this at some point, right? But no matter what you like to do, whether it's corruption or paralysis or blight or any of that kind of stuff, these will help you increase the buildup of your specific status element, right? And then going over even further, we have whole trees dedicated to magic or to feathering. I would advise that if you are going to go down that route, that you would come over here and pick one of these. I don't think you need to pick both of these, right? Um, I'd be hard pressed to see why you would need both magic and feathering, even if your weapon does feathering damage. Because it's like if you're already building and feathering, you have spells for feathering, so that would negate the reason to use magic. So you could kind of think of it like this. For all my Dark Souls vets out there, magic is sorcery, feathering is miracles, right? There's never really been a need, save one that maybe I can think of, where you needed to spec into both of these, right? If you were a sorcerer, you were a sorcerer. You spec'd into sorcery. If you were a faith-based build, you spec'd into faith, right? And you use faith-based stuff, right? You didn't really merge the two of these. Like you can, but it's kind of becomes one of those situations where now, because I'm split into two different schools of magic, that I'm never going to obtain the maximum amount of damage or potential that either one of these schools can offer me, because I'm split. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, and that's not inherently bad. But in a game where enemies can kill you in like 2 hits, if you're not careful, you don't want to waste resources like this. Even with a free and infinite respect system, you don't want to waste resources. I mean, it doesn't benefit you at all to waste resources. Every node should be going into something that is going to help you in some way, right? So yeah, with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is kind of it. I don't really have much more to say about it. All I will say is that if you do choose to spec into one-handed swords, I would strongly advise that you do so under a secondary class type mindset, right? I would not main this class and try to go through the entire game with this class, or you might just be making the game harder than it has to be. And the game's hard enough already. So at least, in new game. But yeah, with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was educational and helped you out with any questions that you might have had. If you have any additional questions that you might have, please shoot me a comment and I will do my very best to answer it to the best of my ability. But with all that out of the way, this is Omni. Thank you all for watching. God bless you all, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.